Hi, I'm David Alzamendi, and today we're going to be looking at deploying the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring tool that is going to help you monitor all your activity, all your assets within the Microsoft Fabric ecosystem. So let's break it down. So we're going to explain what the tool is, how to install it, what if you run into a few challenges, how to configure it. Let's get started. Yeah. So to start with the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring tool, remember it's like a open source tool that you can deploy for free to monitor your Fabric ecosystem. What I like a lot about this tool, look, I know open source, there are many tools available out there, but I think that they've gone the extra step, on making a tool available that you can easily deploy to monitor the ecosystem within Fabric. There are a few limitations, it's as any open source project, some things are in progress, maybe some of the items don't work properly and so on, but you can still get a lot of value over the tool. I'll show you a quick example actually how this will look after you deploy the tool. So this is a good example. So it will deploy, notebooks, you'll have a lakehouse, pipelines, and so on. But in a nutshell, the idea is to have a report where you can monitor your ecosystem. So you'll be able to monitor the environment from the inventory point of view, the assets that you have within the Fabric ecosystem, the users, who is querying the reports, as well as the capacity units, how many capacities that you have. So this is going to help you, of course, plan capacity, understand how you're using the capacity units, identify points of improvement, and as well some things in the roadmap, like unused workspaces and items, or as well running the best practice analyzer across multiple semantic models. There's so much to it. So as you know, many of us, we have created accelerators as part of our companies. I do have like a few accelerators within Microsoft Fabric that serve specific scenarios. I think this tool tries to bundle everything together. Of course, it adds complexity and so on, but I'll show you how easily it is to get started. So to get started with this tool, and then we'll navigate a little bit the different reports and sections and items that we have in here. But so navigate to the GitHub repository. That's the best place to get started. You can go and get a copy of what you're going to see today in this repository. To get started, essentially navigate to this website. Then we're going to go back to this section here, Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring. Click on it. And also, before we move on, I have to, we have to say thank you to the Fabric Customer Advisory team, and as well to the contributors within these tools. So there are more tools available for you. You can also contribute if you feel like giving back to the community and to this project. Go and try to contribute to the projects with the new assets, submittable requests, changes. But let's focus today on the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring tool. So to get it installed, you have a nice wiki in here. I'm going to save us some of the time. So the first step is to essentially download a notebook. So you will see here. So if we go back, it's going to tell us download this notebook. So we get a copy. So make sure that you can download it over here. Copy of that notebook. And now we have few steps. First, we're going to import the notebook and install it. And while the notebook is running, we're going to go and configure a service principal, which basically we are going to use to refresh some of the information within our monitoring tool. So in Power BI, make sure you have a Power BI Fabric supported capacity. This is a trial. I'm going to be using a trial, but you could have a Fabric capacity. And make sure as well that where you have the Microsoft Fabric capacity metrics, because we're going to be extracting some of that information, that has to be supported by Microsoft Fabric as per the notes. So we go to workspaces. We're going to create a new workspace. We're going to call this monitoring. Hit apply. And in this case, you can see I didn't select a Fabric capacity. So I can easily change that in workspace settings or during the creation. You can assign the correct trial capacity. And now here, we're going to go import. And just give me a sec. Let me fix the zoom it. Control it. Making sure everything is fine. Let's see. Okay, so let's go to import notebooks. From this computer, we're going to get the notebook that we previously uploaded. Of course, you know, we're not going to go into detail on how to configure the Spark clusters and so on, but we want you just to focus on installing this tool. We open the notebook, and this notebook is essentially, it has all the steps that you need to execute to import all the items that you need for the solution. You can have a quick read by essentially installing some of the libraries that we need, setting up some connections names. So if you have any specific naming convention for connections, so this is the place where you want to change it. Downloading the files from the GitHub repository that we're going to need, all the items, and then it's going to start creating the workspace and running the solution to execute each one of the items. I highly recommend you to have a quick look at this, have a read. I've done this a few times already, but in a corporate environment, you have to be careful, you know, on what you're going to execute. So make sure that you read, you understand the code at a high level. You don't have to understand the most nitty-gritty, you know, the high level of detail, but you have to understand that you're not importing anything that could be harm for your organization. So in my case, I already validated this multiple times. So I'm going to just hit run all, and this is going to start running. This is going to essentially go to a GitHub repository, copy some support files, create some connections, and then it's going to start deploying many of the items, lakehouses, notebooks, pipelines, and reports that we need. They're going to take a few minutes. So in the meantime, we're going to go back to the Azure portal to create a service principal that we're going to use to refresh the data that we're going to have in the report and in the lakehouse. So back in the Azure portal, we navigate to our Microsoft Intra, and you want to go to app registrations. So this is the app that is going to access the different endpoints to bring data within your solution. So of course, you might not have access to do this, but I'll show you the steps. So something meaningful. And now we only have the app. The app doesn't really have any access. So the next step will be before we move away. So we want to copy the application ID. So I'm going to copy this into my notes. So you want to have the application ID. We're going to get the director ID as well. And then you want to create here a secret as well. So you will go and create the secret. I'm going to create one quick one. And I'm going to move this window around. I'll leave you here with the deployment. I don't want you to see the secret. Copy the secret. And remember, the secret is something that you see only once. So once that you create the secret, essentially it becomes available here. So the maximum that you can define the secret for is 2 years. The recommendation is basically for you to have something that you can rotate the keys for the time being, but this is a good idea. So next, highly recommend as well to add this application into a security group, and then we're going to give that security group access to run APIs in the backend. So for doing that, I usually have already a group that I use for that. We're going to have to see if we find here in groups something related to APIs. So we'll pick up this security group, and in here you will see that they have other applications. No, in that case, okay. So we'll put this application in here. I would suggest, manage access through groups and not directly. So we add that there. And the next step, before we move on, each API, each endpoint that you're going to query within the solution might need different access. So let's go back in here and make sure that we go back to our GitHub repository, making sure that we read the pre-requirements. Go back one step. And okay. So pre-requirements that we're going through. So remember, we have to have a Microsoft Fabric capacity supported. We have to have a service principal. Right now, we are creating the service principal. Ability to create a workspace. I have that option. And a user account with permanent Fabric administrators. Enter right. That'll be me. And we have to make sure that we enable these two options in here as well. So let's have a look at this. So within the admin portal, so I want to navigate to the admin settings. And of course, you have to allow users. Fabric has to be enabled for your organization. If you are rolling out Fabric right now, highly suggest to roll it out only to specific users. But then we want to enable a few things here. So I would recommend not only XMLA endpoints, so this has to be enabled. And ideally here you put the REST APIs group that we were talking about. Let's find it. And this will be actually the correct group. So let's merge these two windows together. Yep. And let's make sure that we assign this one to the right group, which is actually integration. It's not the REST API. So let's see, integration. So you will see here that I should have other REST APIs that I built in the past. See, one for Data Factory, one for Synapse. So now we're going to put in here our API. And this is the group that you want to give access to execute on these items. Can be enabled. Always the suggestion is to enable anything related to endpoints, admin APIs to a subset group of the organization. And let's see if I have the other sections configured correctly. So service principals is enabled. That's fine. Making sure that some of the other options, I don't believe I'm going to need that one, but we might use this one. So now you might be wondering, how do you know what access they need? So this is based on the endpoints that you're going to be gathering the information from for the solution. And I will show you that when the solution is deployed, I show you actually what endpoints you should take into account and how to find it as well. But now we also have, so this means that we have created a service principal, and we have that service principal is part of a group that has access to execute many of the endpoint APIs. Back to our notebook. Let's see how this is doing. Okay, this seems to be working properly. It has created some connections, and now it's starting to essentially import many of the items within the workspace. One of the things that during one of the implementations I ran into a few issues. One of them was that it was not getting the files from GitHub into resources in my lakehouse. If you run into any issues, what you might find useful, because you are not alone, you know how this is go to issues in the GitHub repository, and either look at the ones that are either open, or you could look at the ones that are closed as well, to find out if it's something related to your specific error when deploying the solution. I'll tell you twice, okay? So in one case I ran into this issue, and the good thing about the issues in GitHub is that the people contributing to the repository, first, this is the issue that I ran into, and then you get support from the people being part of the it's a contributor or a different person in the community, okay? They will give you hints. So I ran into this error once, and I also ran into another error over here that I believe, let me find it. It was this one as well at the bottom, those two errors. So that's the funny thing with notebooks. When notebooks start failing, because this is built so you execute the steps in sequence, and then if you stop the kernel and start the kernel again, and then the libraries that you have previously imported, they are no longer available, you might run into issues, okay? It could happen. So if you run into issues, come and have a look, and not only at the open issues, okay, because it could be a known issue that is not fixed, but also look at the closed issues. So let's see how this is doing. So now this is almost finishing, and it's running this step in here. By this time, if I navigate back to my workspace, you'll be amazed with the number of objects that have been imported within the solution. One of the things that you have to do, because remember, we have the notebooks, we have the different semantic models that reports on the pipelines. But what is going to happen to gather the information from some of those endpoints, you want to go and configure some of those connections that were previously created. And you can see the name of the connections that we saw them before. So if I scroll up all the way up, so 2 connections were created with these specific names. And if I navigate now to my manage connections and gateways, you want to modify these 2 connections to use the service principal that you have previously created. So scroll down, and we can even filter here, maybe hopefully by FUAM. Yep. And we're going to go to settings, and in here we're going to change this to service principal, and we're going to paste all the information that we have previously created. So the tenant ID will be your directory, the service principal, and the key here. And you can check if there is connectivity with the endpoint, and we'll do the same for the next one. So we copy the secret, director ID, application ID. Let's hide pin this for now, close, and we'll make sure that there is connectivity. Nice. Now, let's go and have another look at the notebook. So we're progressing with this, and hopefully everything is finishing by now. So if you more steps. So right now it's running a notebook that is going to create the tables within the lakehouse. And we'll stop here for a second. So then the way that it works, okay, so basically you deploy the solution. This solution is going to import notebooks, semantic models, pipelines, reports within the workspace where you are executing the notebook. And then it's going to run it's going to create as well a lakehouse. Then it's going to run some notebooks to create the tables within the lakehouse. And the process is the following, right? So you're going to execute some pipelines, data factory pipelines. Those pipelines, they're going to move the information within your lakehouse. Then that information, those files, they're going to be imported with notebooks into the lakehouse tables. So it's basically from the endpoints, example, we're trying to bring the activities, or we're trying to list the capacities. We put that into the lakehouse, we load it into tables, and then we're going to make that information available through a semantic models and the reports. And the whole orchestration end to end essentially happens with data factory pipelines. Let's continue looking at the progress of our solution. It's almost still executing. Let's navigate back to our wiki. Let's make sure that we're following the right steps. I did find the documentation is quite good. It gives you step by step what you have to do. Look, you cannot criticize any documentation. At least there is documentation. There might be some misunderstanding, on what access the service principal needs as such. But I followed these steps and it worked quite well, essentially. We modified the service connections, we add the service principals, and we already have the capacity metrics app. This is really important to have it because you're going to get the usage of the capacity units and so on from the Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app. Remember, the Fabric Capacity Metrics app, this one here, you can install it for free by going to apps, and you will go to get apps. Let me make this a little bit bigger and search for this too. In regards to capacity units, remember the Fabric Capacity Metrics app only has 14 days of data, while the Unified Monitoring Fabric tool, the one that we're provisioning, is going to overcome the limitation. So now it has finished, and we can navigate to our workspace. And you'll see a lot of notebooks. You can organize them within folders. But the next step, once this has been provisioned, is to load data. And there is a master orchestrator for loading the data, and it's the load Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring Tool data end-to-end, this one here. The name might change. Okay, so make sure that you read the documentation. I believe the documentation right now has a previous name, but next step is just you want to execute this pipeline. Actually, before you execute it, make sure that you update the parameters that you have at the bottom. And the metrics, Fabric Capacity Metrics workspace, in my case, you can see it has a different name. So I want to copy this name, and we want to put it in here. And this will be the name of the dataset. So I can try making sure that is the right name of the dataset. Yes. And then what else do you have here? So there are many parameters. Some of them I'm not familiar with them yet. One that I'm familiar with, the activity days in the scope. So this is how many days backwards you're going to go and seeking for activity information. Example, so if you are looking for who is querying reports, creating reports, and so on, so this means that you will go 30 days back in time to load that information. If you're planning to, first of all, if you're planning to run this on a daily basis, it wouldn't make sense every time to go and capture 30 days because you will be just duplicating the effort. And that in Microsoft Fabric means using more capacity units. So I guess my recommendation in here, look, do it, run the pipeline every week. That should be more than enough, unless you are crazy for looking at this report every day. So this is something that if you want to monitor in, doing continuous improvement and identifying issues, I think once a week is fine. If you are concerned about the Microsoft Fabric capacity units usage, stick to the Microsoft Fabric capacity metrics app, because that one has the most up-to-date information since the dataset is refreshed in there, and this tool actually imports information from that semantic model. So maybe run this one once a week, and if you want to keep an eye on the Fabric capacity usage, look at the metrics app. On top of that, so highly suggest here to maybe the first time you can leave 30 days, but going forward, maybe do 29, because some of the endpoints that you're going to query, they only allow you to get information up to 30 days. And depending on when and from where you're executing this, you might actually run a little bit over that window, and it might return a specific error for the last day. Let's leave it 30 days. So I can show you the error. And now we have to save the new default parameters. Well, you can change the parameters at runtime. Highly recommend, this doesn't change a lot. We'll leave it there and execute. And now this is going to start running. Another reason why you want to execute this on a weekly basis and not every day is because it does use capacity units. I don't see any reason why you should be running this, all the notebooks, all the copy activities every day, unless you work in a really large environment and you have people actively looking on a daily basis at this data, which in most cases, I think most of us, once a week will be more than enough. So we'll give some time and I'll show you what's happening behind the scenes in the meantime. I'm going to show you one specific one that I like, the load activities one. So this is essentially calling one of the other pipelines, and you can see it's passing the parameters from which date, how many days you are trying to load from a specific point in time. So we open this pipeline from here. First step is to delete, I guess, any existing files available in that raw folder. You can see the location of the lakehouse. We will go to the lakehouse soon. Specify a specific range to load dates. And you see here you see the maximum range allowed in this pipeline can be 0 to 28 days. Because when you start getting the information, and this is going to basically loop, per each day is going to loop, a future improvement that you can contribute to the solution open source. So maybe a future improvement could be actually just give me the option to load all the data from the last time that we executed the pipeline. And on top of that, you have to consider, you will see now when we open this copy activity in here, we define some variables. But here you have the connection that we configured the connectivity before, but you also have here the specific endpoint where we're getting the information from. So if I copy this and I go to the Power BI REST APIs, search for that one, this is basically calling this specific endpoint that is going to return all the activities within our Fabric tenant, and you can pass a parameter of dates, end date, start date, and end date, and so on. In regards to permissions, I mentioned before, you have to make sure that the service principal that you're creating has access to be able to gather the information from that specific endpoint. And the documentation is quite good as well on the scope that you need and what type of access is required. And a similar approach is followed for the other endpoints. You can see here, we go to the endpoint, we create a file in the lakehouse, and if we open this, I would expect here to have a dynamic path based on the date. Let's open this lakehouse, and we'll be back to the pipeline. But this is the main lakehouse where the information is going to be stored. You can see how many tables. The naming convention, I think it is excellent. I found that identifying what table is being used for what, extremely helpful. And you can see how we start seeing some of the information being populated within the Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse. This is great. And then at the bottom, you can see as well the raw files that are being uploaded from the pipelines. We'll be back soon to show the activities. Once that information, I'm walking you through a process how this works. It's important to understand it. Once that information is put in the lakehouse, in the raw folder, then there'll be a notebook that you can open from here as well to follow every single step with parameters that essentially loads the information from that specific folder. It puts that information in a nice silver layer, and then we're defining the name of the table where we're going to load that information, and we look through the different files to transform and load that information in the gold layer. This is itself, by itself, the solution is like having a data warehouse itself. So, and one of the things that it is really, really cool about this solution, that it takes advantage of many of the things and approaches that you need for building a data analytics environment. So if you are looking at having parameters within notebooks, or dynamically load different files, or store the different files in a raw folder, in the bronze layer, in the silver layer, there are many things within the solution that you can look at and practices that you can adopt as part of your data warehouse environment. I really actually how this has been built. Let's keep looking at the next step. And then finally, the next step is to run a different notebook that is going to potentially aggregate some of that information for the last 30 days, which will be kind of our aggregated table within the gold layer. So if we focus on the lakehouse, I will go back to the lakehouse. All the data is being loaded in here, but there are more lakehouses. This is the most important one because this is the one that you're going to be querying for creating reports and for the semantic model that has all the important information. But if I go back to our monitoring workspace, you will see as well something like a configuration lakehouse and a backup lakehouse. So if we open the config lakehouse, this actually has the information that we executed as part of the initial notebook to create some of those tables. This is really cool. This means that now you have another example for building a data movement meta-driven approach within your organization. This is a small example, really basic, but if you look at the notebook and how it's being built, good example for those ones starting with meta-driven approaches and dynamic object creation. So let's stop for a second and let's go back to our main pipeline to see how we are tracking. Okay, now it's in the step of, well, we are going to look at this, but now it is in the step basically on loading some of the activities. So unless this step is failing, and we can look at the output, expand this, and here when we look, you can monitor a couple of things in here. The first one is the input. In here you can see what date and what file name is going to be stored. And you can also see the relative URL where the information is being extracted. And if I click on the copy activity, just mouse over, this is different from Data Factory and Synapse Data Factory. You have to click on task. You will see as well if the activity is copying any objects, as well as the throughput of the connectivity. This is where agree, disagree. So we could have a conversation where and think that if this process is overkill just to get some activity events from the endpoints, right? So do we really have to go and create notebooks and execute those notebooks in the Apache Spark clusters and run the pipeline so many times? So the reality is that you might be able to build a smaller solution that achieves the same and uses less computing units, less capacity units. But remember, we get this out of the box from an open source project. So in a matter of only 37 minutes, we've been able to run a notebook that provisions the solution, and we're starting to load some information within that lakehouse. This is a great idea. It's a great starting point for us to look at inventory and running assessments. I've been using this tool recently for running assessments for clients. So instead of me trying to run PowerShell scripts and deploying my accelerators and spending just maybe a couple of days just trying to gather information, I found that if there is a Fabric capacity trial or a paid capacity, you can easily deploy the solution, run the assessment, capture all the information that you need for providing recommendations for my clients. This is really useful. And I also see the value on you as a final client having a place where you can monitor all the Fabric items. Yeah. Now, I highly disagree that we have to provision an open source project to be able to gather this metadata. I would like Microsoft actually to provide this information out of the box without me having to spend my Fabric capacity units and having to maintain the solution. And if the solution breaks, because there are many moving parts, somebody have to go and fix it. And then, as well, open source projects, they are great while they are being maintained. So there is a life cycle to it. So in the moment that those open source projects are not being maintained, that means now that we have a not supported solution. So in an ideal world, I would like Microsoft to offer these capabilities as part of their offering without us having to install any tools. But even after saying that, I love this solution. So let's go one step back. Let's go and try to troubleshoot one of those errors. So we close this window, close the notebooks, the old, not so nice experience, having objects open within Microsoft Fabric, so many of them. Okay, let's look at this specific error. Okay, so it's telling us that one of the notebooks failed on querying a specific table. That's fine. So we can open this pipeline. and see what step failed. Okay, the transfer capacity metric data unit notebook failed. So let's open this notebook from here. And we're going to essentially have a look at this. And somehow this should be, this is a parameters field. I'm not so worried. This is going to be override in runtime. I would expect that to happen. But let's have another quick look, making sure that I'm on the right page. And we can look at this error. Copy this specific table name. We'll get the table name. This is real life, real troubleshooting. This could happen to you. In some cases, this error just, the old IT solution just restart the pipeline and maybe it works. So I'm going to do that right now because it takes making sure that we pass the right parameters. So metrics workspace. Let me see, this comes from the main pipeline. I just want to make sure that I pass the right parameters. Scroll down, parameters, and the one that failed, it was this one here, settings. No, sorry, the capacity ones. The one with this one here. Okay, so number of days, the metrics workspace, and the metrics dataset. So those are going to be the important 2 steps. And we're going to go back, and now we know exactly how to execute this. So we put this workspace settings, this in here, and we're going to get as well the Microsoft Safari capacity semantic model name. In here, parameters one more time, and we're going to save this. The reason why I was saying, look, if you are going to be doing some analysis while you troubleshoot something, yes, let's give it a go, see if it works now. Maybe there was a delay since we changed the name of the table of the workspace, but now we can go back to this specific notebook and find why that specific table failed. So we find the table name. Let's see if it's in here. So essentially this variable is essentially defining a specific table name that has to exist. And now we just pick up this variable and see where we use this variable within our solution. Okay, it's doing a, it's like a traditional, we remove the information from the existing table and then we're going to load it again. It's a full truncate because I think this is just kind of a staying table. So put in there, delete it from there, and I would expect there to be another select. Quite a lot of information. So what I would say, look, is like we're going to go down to this specific lakehouse, and we're going to try to find out if that table is there now or not. So we open this staying lakehouse, and we're going to see if this table is not here. And because this table is not here, I would expect, honestly, for the pipeline that we're running again to see if it works, I would expect this to fail again. And if this is correct, you can see it failed again. So now we have a more in detail scenario. So now I say, okay, you can say that table should have been provisioned as part of the initial deployment. because it's not being created within our notebook here. So in the first time that we're talking about that table, we expect that table to exist. So now we can do further troubleshooting. I don't know if we're going to do it today, but we can go to the original notebook and find out in here when we were creating the tables if we missed somehow creating that specific table, which is a new adventure that we're going to leave for a different day. And the other thing, remember, I always say, okay, let's see if actually somebody had the same issue on creating this specific table. Not yet. So we'll have to find out, what's the script that we have to run to create those tables. Another thing that you can do is to try running the script again to see if that table appears. Let me show you. Let's see a working solution. I'm going to navigate to another environment so we can compare. So this is a different environment. The solution is working properly here. And we're going to open the staging warehouse. And we're going to see if that table is there. Actually, we're missing quite a few tables. So the capacity metrics table, it is in here. I'm not so sure if this table is being created on runtime. So maybe that's the bit that we got wrong. Maybe we're too down the path in here. Maybe the creation of the table happened in a previous system. We're going to let it go. Happy to continue. You know how it is. We'll find that error eventually. And the other error I wanted to show you is this load activity error. So if I open this, you will see that most of the activities, they run correctly. But remember, we put the activity to load 30 days. And there's a limit on how many days you can load. I think it's mentioned here. There's a maximum, it's not here, but it's in the documentation. There's a maximum of 30 days that you can load, up to 30 days. So you will always find out that if you run the pipeline for 30 days, one of the activities, the last one, that is getting the information from almost 1 month ago, that one is going to fail. So that's why when executing the end-to-end pipeline, I recommend, load 29 days or load 30, but just be aware that the last day is going to fail. We continue with this option here and go back to the previous step. This is not going to take a long time. I like, even though as well, some of the steps might fail, so the other steps are going to execute. And you can see that in here, right? So all the activities, they've been set up to run on completion. I like that because some cases, maybe you don't need all the information, or it doesn't matter, if some of the information is not available. Let's be honest, who's going to be looking at this on a daily basis? Highly recommend as well, maybe use some of the information in this report, in the FUAM report, as part of your KPIs for the data analytics team, because this helps explain the story on the investment of your data analytics platform. We have information about the capacity, and how those capacities that are being used and their SKUs. We also have information about the inventory of the workspaces and how those workspaces are being allocated to different capacities and the storage format and so on. There's a whole section about items catalog. I think this is really cool. And remember, we have a lot of filters here on the right side. If you want to filter for a specific capacity or workspace, you can go and do that. It works. The tenant settings as well. I think this is really useful to understand a snapshot on something that might have changed recently. If any of these configurations have been modified, you can keep track of the history of the admin settings. I love the idea of the activities. You can see all the activities within the Fabric environment. In this case, this example is not working, but when a user queries a report, creates reports, and creates a lakehouse, so you will see all that information in here, as well as the report usage. And coming soon, I think they will have something for the best practice analysis results. I don't know. It surprises me that this page is already in the report, but maybe executing the notebook is not part of the main pipeline. I wander around. I tried finding a notebook actually that executes the best practice analyzer for all the semantic models. I think that's something easy to achieve. I have a notebook that goes through all the different semantic models and put that into a table. I would expect us to have a notebook, if it's not already here, near in the future, that is being executed as part of that master pipeline that shows all the best practices results for all the reports. And what else? Okay, a couple of more things. So this eventually will finish and load the information for some of the assets. The capacity metrics failed. And we'll try one more time. We go a little further. So we know that it's not the notebooks. We know that the notebooks are expecting that table to be already available in there. So let me explore the script that is going to create all those tables. The data, I believe, is coming from here, and then we're going to load the table definition into the config lakehouse. I have a feeling that while executing this step, maybe it hasn't created all the tables. So I'm going to execute this one more time. It might require the libraries to be imported because I haven't imported those libraries. Let's give some time and let's go and have a look. We don't need this for time being. Starting the kernel, and we're going to open this lakehouse in here, and we're going to see if we get somewhere. So do we see one more table? I thought there were three. Just let's give some time. If you want to know what the notebook, under behind the scene is doing, you can always find the next notebook. In this case, so we're looking at the workspace tables notebook. Let's see if that's available in here. I think that might come as part of the init files that's been attached as a resource within the notebook. Okay, let's give some time. And let's make sure. Let's see if it's really doing something here. I don't see any new tables. Okay, but once that the pipeline finishes, independently of if some of the steps have failed, the next step basically is just, have a quick look at the semantic models. There are a few more things that we can see. So the semantic models, you can see that now they are being refreshed. Before they were in error. And the main report is this core report here. So how this is built, you have a core report, and then by drilling through, you can go to other reports, but you can also access those reports, like the child reports, if you want to. Here you can see if I open this core report, I would expect to have some data already available to us. You can see we have the active items, the workspaces, somehow we haven't gathered, so the fabric capacity that we're using is new, so I wouldn't expect to have any data in there, but all this data will become available as the right permissions that are granted, and you will have a unified experience for monitoring your fabric environment. So let's see if we got anything specific here in activities. No, making sure that there's no any filter. But we should have a few things in the other items. There it is. So here we have information about the different items within my tenant. And it does look that maybe the service principal that we have created is missing some permissions. And before we wrap up, just out of curiosity, we see that we didn't import the libraries in here. So this will be just, import the libraries back again. You can run the whole notebook. Not that one, sorry. This one here, and start troubleshooting. And in some cases, it might be worth it as well. Just delete the whole workspace, create a new workspace, import the notebook, and get started again. Start with a click. If things go like wrong and it's taking a lot of time, create a new workspace, import the notebook, and start again. That's basically all for today. We looked at actually how easy it is to deploy the tool that is going to allow you to monitor all your items within the Microsoft Fabric ecosystem. The steps that I followed are the same steps that you have to follow to deploy it. So conversation around permissions. I'm definitely maybe missing something, adding permissions, maybe it's not in the documentation. I tried with other service principals and it works great, so I'm sure that it's about permissions. If you have any questions, go and connect with me in the social networks. Don't forget to subscribe, like it, and see you next week.